So I'm just gonna introduce photosynthesis because we just finished respiration, right? And we're gonna talk about how plants convert. Actually, it's not just plants. Let's clear the air right now. It ain't just plants. It's also things like bacteria, right? So when we talk about photosynthesis, it's not just plants. It's things that can use sunlight to do what? What can they do with the sunlight? Convert it into nutrients. Now, the nutrients that you're seeing here is what? What is this? Right. We're going to talk about how glucose is made. If you think about what you just did, we did a whole chapter on respiration, which is how glucose is what? Broken down and released into energy, right? We're going to talk about the complementary process, which is how we make glucose, okay, using certain ingredients, including the sun. Now, although we're going to talk about leaves and plants, I want you to understand that this actually first evolved in bacteria, okay? And we're going to talk about that in a second. So this is the simplified version of the equation for photosynthesis. It almost looks like the reverse of respiration, because you see here you're starting with carbon dioxide and water, and you get back sugar, and you get oxygen, right? You can see the oxygen right over here. So it kind of looks like the opposite of respiration, because in respiration you use up glucose and oxygen, and what do you make? You make water and carbon dioxide. But I'm going to show it to you, it's not the reverse. Okay? This is not the reverse of respiration. So we will talk about leaves in this, chapter, but I want you to understand it's not just leaves, not just plants. It's other things too. Okay? So what we're going to focus on is an organelle in the leaf. In a leaf, called the chloroplast. Now, what do you think this organelle would compare to in regards to respiration? You know how in respiration we focused on an organelle? What was it? It was the mitochondria. So this is the counterpart. The chloroplast is the counterpart to the mitochondria. Now, unlike the mitochondria, it does not make carbon dioxide. Does not break down sugar. This thing does something different. This makes sugar, and it uses up carbon dioxide, and it relies on sunlight energy to do it. Okay. So here's a nice little picture of the chloroplast. Why is the chloroplast green? So take a look at this picture. What's the predominant color you're seeing here? Green. Why? Why is anything a color? Why is your sweater green? Why would your eyes be blue? Why would someone's pencil case be red? What was that, Emily? Right. It's the color, thank you. It's the color that's not being absorbed. Okay? So something is green, that means it's not absorbing green. So you can see here, you have sunlight. Sunlight comes in. A lot of colors are absorbed. We'll talk about the absorption of colors, but the ones that are not absorbed are reflected. That's what you see. You see the reflected colors. Okay? And the predominant color that is reflected is green because the predominant pigments in the chloroplast are chlorophylls. And guess what chlorophylls reflect? Green. So when you get your results today from your chromatogram, you're going to see the chlorophylls, which are green, or like a yellow-green. Okay. So here is another picture of the chloroplasts. Okay. The chloroplasts are a double membrane organelle. So what also was a double membrane organelle? The mitochondria. The chloroplast have these structures in them called thylakoids. You can see here's a thylakoid. They stack up like pancakes. Okay. Here's another picture of that. The thylakoids. Zoom in, and you can see that in this diagram we have protons. Now, if you remember, how was most of the energy made in respiration? It was used making an enzyme. What was the name of that enzyme? ATP synthase. And how did it work? For it to work, what had to flow through it? Protons, right? Protons through the enzyme. Electrons through the electron transport chain. Well, the reason why I'm showing you this diagram or this picture of protons, because guess what? It's the same way to make energy in photosynthesis. Okay? You're going to see that as we go through this. Now, just a little word about the mitochondria. This is what we're going to talk about. Remember, we're going to focus on plants, but it's not just plants. Photosynthesis first evolved in bacteria. Now, the mitochondria, I said, is a double membrane organelle, 2 membranes. That's actually not always true. In some organisms, actually 3 membranes, some it's 4. We don't need to worry about that. But I will mention this too. The chloroplast also has its own DNA. Guess why? Exactly the same story. Exactly the same story. Very good, Kim. The mitochondria and the chloroplast were at one point free living bacteria. The mitochondria figured out a trick, which was to use oxygen to break down sugar and get energy out of it, right? Oxidative phosphorylation. The chloroplast was a free-living bacteria. We know that there are bacteria out there that, like cyanobacteria, that can take sunlight energy and make sugar out of it. And the chloroplast was that type of bacteria, okay? But it evolved over time to be the chloroplast. So it's the same story as the mitochondria. And what you see as we go through photosynthesis and we look at the focus of being the chloroplast, we'll see that it's divided into 2 stages, okay? There is first stage, which involves lights, okay? Called the light reactions. So if I think of photosynthesis, photo meaning light, and then there's a synthesis part where we're talking about the making of sugar, and that's the Calvin cycle. It used to be called the dark reactions, but they got rid of that name. Kind of same reason why they got rid of the name lock and key, because it gives students the wrong impression. If I say to you, this is the dark reaction, what would come to mind? It has to happen in what? In the dark, right? So they realize that that's not a really good name. So the dark reactions are what's going to happen and what you're going to see that's going to go on in what's called the Calvin cycle. Okay? So here's photosynthesis. We know we need water for it, according to this flow chart. We know we get out oxygen. So if I had to put things in order, what came first, photosynthesis or aerobic respiration? What came first, aerobic respiration or photosynthesis? Well, what does aerobic respiration require? Well, what does it need to drive the last stage? It needs oxygen. Remember, oxygen has to come out and pull the electrons out. So what came first, photosynthesis or aerobic respiration? Has to be photosynthesis, right? Because it made the oxygen for eventually aerobic respiration. But what actually came first was something in cellular respiration. What part of cellular respiration does not require oxygen? What stage? Think about fermentation, glycolysis. So if you put it in order, glycolysis came first, then photosynthesis, then basically the aerobic respiration. Okay. So in photosynthesis, we will talk about 2 different stages. We'll talk about the first stage, which is how light energy is used. And you'll see actually in this stage and in the second stage, that we're going to see some redox reactions, very similar to what you saw in respiration. So here's a nice little picture showing us a waste product of photosynthesis, which is oxygen. Okay, oxygen is the waste product of photosynthesis. Here's a picture showing us the different colors of light. So this is what's known as the visible spectrum. All of these things are just basically different manifestations of light. Light, gamma rays, X-rays, microwaves, they're all the same thing. They're all a form of electromagnetic radiation. Plants evolved the ability to use visible light as a form of energy. Okay? And the molecule that captures the light and converts it into energy are things like chlorophyll. Now, it's not the only pigment, because you're going to see from your lab, there's more than just green pigments in your samples. There are other things that are going to capture sunlight. So here's a structure of chlorophyll. Okay? It's got this ring surrounded, in the center is magnesium, and then it's got this hydrocarbon tail. Okay? So we are going to focus on the chlorophylls in photosynthesis, but they're not the only pigments. Okay? Here's another one. Okay? That you probably recognize from your lab. And this is the absorption spectrum of chlorophyll. Okay? This is where chlorophyll absorbs color very well. So you can see that chlorophyll absorbs in the blues. This is the absorption spectrum. This is how much is being absorbed. And this is the wavelength of light, which corresponds to the color. Okay? So you'll notice that in the blue region and in the red region, not orange, but red region, we have high levels of absorption. See the peaks? And in the middle, where there's green, yellow, and orange, very low level absorption. And you look at this graph over here. This is the reaction rate. How fast photosynthesis is happening. And where do you notice is highest? In the blues, right? Because these peaks correspond. And in the red. And that makes sense because for photosynthesis to work, we need energy from the sun. And the main pigment, and this is why leaves are green, because the main pigment is, guess what? Chlorophyll. So if chlorophyll does its best job at absorbing blue and red light, that means most of the energy is going to come from blue and red light. So that's why photosynthesis peaks in blue and red light. Okay? And next time, we'll talk about the Engelmann experiment, which kind of relates to this absorption of chlorophyll and photosynthetic rays, different colors. Okay? So we're going to stop there. That was very short, and we'll continue probably tomorrow. Okay, ladies? The end.